There's a moment every leader experiences and most fail it. It is not when someone quits, it is not when numbers drop, and it is not when a deal is lost. It is the moment you look at someone and think, they know better, they just do not care. That thought feels accurate, it feels justified, and it feels obvious. And it is one of the most expensive miscalculations you will ever make. Most people believe that failure inside a sales organization comes from an attitude, bad mindset, lack of hunger, poor character. So they respond accordingly. They push harder, they get stricter, they become more intense. Here's what almost nobody stops to question. What if the behavior you're reacting to is not driven by intention at all? What if the real problem is not resistance, but blindness? Because when you misdiagnose the source of a problem, you do not just fail to fix it, you make it actually worse. So before we talk about performance, discipline, or accountability, you have to face with a harder possibility. You might be judging people for something they do not even see or understand. If you observe long enough, pattern starts to repeat itself. Same mistakes across different people, in different roles, in different environments. At first, it feels personal. Then it feels frustrating. And eventually it starts to feel intentional. But there's a principle, quite almost uncomfortable, that explains most of it. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it's precise. And that principle is called Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by ignorance or incompetence. See, often credited to Robert J. Hanlon, this idea did not come from theory alone. It came from observation. Repeated, frustrating, and undeniable observation of human behavior. And here's the part most people miss. This is not a statement about being harmless. It is a statement about how often we're wrong about why things happen. Because the human brain has bias. It would rather assume intent than admit confusion. Intent feels controllable. Ignorance feels uncomfortable. So we label. And the moment we label, we stop looking deeper. Now, this is where people either misuse this idea or completely miss its power. Because this is not telling you to excuse the failure. It's telling you to see it correctly. And once you see it correctly, you stop reacting to it and you begin fixing it. So why do people fail? Most people are not failing because they're not trying to get away with something. They're failing because they're operating inside a reality that is incomplete. Think about what that means. An agent gets on a call and they don't close. And they say to themselves, I thought I did everything right. A leader hears that and thinks they're lying. They know exactly what they did wrong. But the truth is more dangerous than that. They might actually believe it, not because they're dishonest, but because their understanding is shallow. They do not know what right actually looks like under pressure. Now multiply that across an entire team. Multiply that across different leadership layers. Now you don't have a performance problem, you have a perception problem. And perception problems cannot be solved with pressure. To really understand how destructive this becomes, you have to see it where it lives. In everyday moments that seem small, but compound into outcomes. We as humans have this behavior that is the false judgment moment. See, we think people messed up on purpose. What actually happened is that they reached the edge of their current ability and they did not even realize it. For example, an agent handles an objection about pricing. They respond quickly, confidently, and move on. From their perspective, they handled it. From reality, they deflected it instead of resolving it. The deal dies 2 minutes later. They walk away thinking the lead was not serious, the lead was garbage. Then you got the leader watches the call and thinks they're not listening, they do not care to improve. Both are wrong. See, the agent did not see the mistake. The leader misread the intent. So the real issue was never addressed. So the mistakes continue to repeat itself on and on and on. We as humans will live with this illusion of clear communication. You know, what people think is, I explained this already. But what actually happened is that you transmitted information but never confirmed the understanding. For example, a leader explains how to position a value over price. The team sits in a big training room and nods. The next day, agents are still leading with discounts, still using 30-day money-back guarantee. The leaders react and they think to themselves, they're just not applying what I thought. But what actually happened? See, the explanation lived at the leader's level of experience. The agents translated into something simpler. lowered the price to win faster. The message did not land, it transformed. Now the team is executing a distorted version of the instruction constantly. And the leader is frustrated with the behavior that was unintentionally created. Another example I want to give you guys is the experience gap under pressure. What people think is that they should know this by now. What actually happens is they only know it in the calm conditions, not in real scenarios. There's a difference between a training and a battle, right? Training is much easier because you know you're not going to die in that process. But when you're in a battle, you know that it's a real scenario. Everything about you is not designed to operate under pressure. See, in agent practices, closing technique in training, they sound sharp, they sound clean, they sound confident. Then they get on a live call and the customer is extremely impatient, yelling at them. The prospect pushes back emotionally. Now the pressure enters, it rises. The agent's brain abandons structure and goes into survival mode. They revert to what feels safe, not what is correct. The leader hears the call and thinks they're choosing not to use the system. But the truth is, they never owned the system deeply enough to rely on it under the pressure. Same thing applies to my children in jiu-jitsu. In normal practice, they master the moves. They know exactly how to escape different things. But then when they go into the real match and they go against an opponent who's tough, big, who has more experience and puts them in a pressure moment, it's almost like sometimes they freeze and they forget what to do. So that is not defiance. That is incomplete conditioning. Now that brings me to the next point, which is the emotional mislabeling trap. What people think is that, oh, they're just being difficult. But what actually happens is that they're overwhelmed and did not have the tools to respond. An agent starts missing numbers. They're not doing their progress report. They're not hitting quota. Energy drops, engagement drops, they stop asking questions. From the outside, it looks like isolation and disengagement. The leader labels it, they're checked out. But internally, the agent is thinking, I do not know what I'm doing wrong anymore. They're not pulling away because they do not care. They're pulling away because they do not know how to fix it. And instead of receiving clarity, they receive pressure. So the gap widens itself. Now, if you step back and look at all of these examples I just gave you, all of this together, you start to see something uncomfortable. The problem was never the person. The problem was the invisible gap that nobody slowed down enough to identify. And this is where most people lose. Agents, leaders, they lose in the moment they stop asking questions. Not because they do not care, but because they do not want to expose what they do not understand. So they perform confidence while operating in confusion. And that is where growth stops. Leaders lose the moment they assume intent. Because the second you believe someone is choosing to fail, you stop trying to understand why they're failing. Now, you begin to react and not lead. And over time, this creates a silent erosion. Misdiagnosed problems, repeated mistakes, frustrated leadership, disconnected and isolated teams. All from one wrong assumption. So if most failure is not malicious, if it's not intentional, if it's not people trying to get away with something, then the entire approach has to change. Not softer, not lowering the standard, but being smarter. And this is how elite operators win. They separate intent from capability. They do not ask, why are they doing this? They ask, what are they missing? So agents feel understood while leaders gain clarity. They verify understanding, not just deliver instruction. They do not stop at explanation. They actually test it. They watch it being applied. They correct it in real time. Example, instead of saying, focus on value, they have the agent run the pitch live and break it down line by line. Now, there's no assumption anymore, only evidence. They train for pressure, not comfort. They understand that knowledge in training does not equal execution in reality. So they simulate the pressure. They make it as live as possible. They throw big objections, strong resistance. They operate with emotion. And that way, agents build real confidence and leaders build real consistency. This will create environments where not knowing is allowed, but staying unaware is not. Agents are encouraged to ask, but they're also required to do what? Improve. There is no shame in not knowing. The only shame should be not evolving. They fix systems, not just people. When the same mistake shows up across multiple individuals, they do not blame individuals. They begin to audit the system because the patterns do not come from coincidence. They come from structure. And once you begin to operate this way, you will notice that something changes. You stop reacting to a behavior and you start understanding it. See, average people, they say they know better. They just do not care. But elite leaders understand one thing. If they truly knew better, their result would reflect it. I want you guys to remember this. Misjudging intent does not just blind you to the problem. It locks you into repeating it. Now, if you want to build something real, something that scales, something that lasts, you have to see clearly. Not emotionally, not reactively, but accurately. Because of what frustrates you is not defiance. It is misunderstanding that has gone uncorrected. And once you start diagnosing that correctly, you do not just improve performance, you change the entire trajectory of your people. If this shifted how you see mistakes, performance, and people, subscribe now. This is not a surface level content. This is for people who are serious about mastering sales, leadership, and building something that actually works under pressure. Like this, some more leaders stop reacting emotionally and start leading intelligently. And share this with someone who's pushing hard, but keeps hitting the same wall without realizing why. Love you all. Take care.